Hey guys, welcome to Electrotech Buy. My name is Nicholas Shear and I'm going to be showing you how to replace the logic board on a 2013 MacBook Air i7 11-inch screen, model number A1465. Now to begin this repair we will need a couple of tools, one being the Pentalobe 5-point screwdriver, 1.2mm, a Torx pry screwdriver, and a spudger. So without further ado, let's get started on the repair. Now, in order to remove the bottom case, there are 10 screws that need to be removed. And for this, we will be using the Pentalobe 5-point 1.2mm screwdriver. Now, the 3 screws near the vent on the right side will be longer than the rest of the screws. So keep that in mind when we remove them and put them back in. Now that the screws have been removed, you can gently remove the back case from lifting up from the vent side. The first step is to disconnect the battery connection into the logic board. There are 5 screws that hold the battery in place which need to be removed. Now gently lift the top side of the battery in a tilting motion and remove it from the bottom case. This is the solid-state PCIe internal hard drive, which we will be removing. It is held on the logic board by a connector plate on one end and a single screw on the other. To remove the SSD drive, gently lift up on the side where the screw is and slide it out of its connector bracket. Be careful because it will give you some resistance. This is the Wi-Fi board and antenna connectors. It is held onto the motherboard in the same manner as the SSD with a connector plate and one screw. But before that, we must disconnect the antenna cables first. Now you can undo the screw and gently lift up on the same manner as the SSD from the screw side and slide out. This is the LCD connector. It is being held on to the logic board with a locking clip that needs to be lifted up by pulling on the black tape and gently slide it outward. Now we will begin disconnecting the rest of the cables on the logic board. We will start off by disconnecting the trackpad, keyboard, and backlight cables. These cables are held onto the logic board with a locking bracket which needs to be lifted up and the flex cable can be slid out. Now we will remove the flex cable that connects the I/O control board to the logic board. This can be done by simply lifting straight up on both ends. And now we can remove any remaining cables connected to the logic board. The fan contains 3 screws which hold it in place with the motherboard, which need to be removed in order to remove the fan. The I/O control board is held down with 1 screw. Now gently remove the I/O board from its housing. There are 3 remaining screws that hold the logic board in place, which need to be removed. The logic board can now be removed. Gently lift up on the logic board without snagging it on any loose wires. Reinstall the logic board from the Thunderbolt and USB port side first. Make sure to give clearance to all the loose cables so they don't get crimped underneath the logic board. Now make sure the logic board is seated securely and properly by lining up the screw holes. Now let's begin by putting the screws back in, which will hold the logic board in place. Remember not to tighten the screws too much, it may cause damage to the logic board. A snug fit is suffice. Now let's place the I/O control board back in the same way that we removed it, but in reverse. Now the fan can be installed in its housing. Now we can put back the 3 screws that we removed from the fan. Now that the fan is back in place, we can begin connecting all the connectors. Make sure the white line on the cable disappears inside of the connector before you lock the bracket. Do not put any tension on the cable itself. Use the metal edges to gently push in the connector. Now place the flex cable which connects the I/O control board to the logic board, and align the 2 connectors in place and gently push down without using too much force. You should hear a click. We can now reconnect the Wi-Fi airport card by slowly placing it in position and pushing it gently into its slot. Now we can place the SSD back in its position and gently push that back in its slot. We can reconnect the keyboard, trackpad, and backlight connectors. Now we can connect the LCD connector. The locking bracket needs to be in an upward position for the connector to go into place. Gently slide it into place, making sure that all connectors are lining up properly. Now bring the locking bracket over the connector and lock it into place. We can connect the Wi-Fi antenna cables now. The short cable goes onto the upper connector and the long cable goes to the lower connector. Place the connectors in position and gently push down until you hear a click. Now we can put the battery back into place. Start by putting the bottom end of the battery first and then slowly laying down the top end in place. Now we can put the screws back in. Remember to put the screws in the same order that they came out. The top left corner and the top right corner will have longer screws than the bottom right and bottom left corners. The middle screw will be the longest. This completes our tutorial on logic board replacement on a 2013 MacBook Air.